Hey, Joe, what are you seeing on social media?
A lot of the people that are falling for a lot of the conspiracies out there, they tend to have a mistrust of the colonial government, and their ancestors have been persecuted by the government. So they had this natural mistrust. So they're turning to conspiracy theories that help them justify their biases. I don't block the people that come up with conspiracy theories. I try to discuss with them to see the futility in the information or the disinformation that they're spreading.
So, Toy, what are you seeing in your community?
Tuhoi has experienced firsthand the brutality of the state, of the Crown, in full swing. And so, understandably and justifiably, there is that historical mistrust of the Crown and of mainstream media. What really strikes with me, though, Moana, in this particular situation that we're in, is that it seems that we have abandoned our trust in those who have been fighting this fight for so long. My father, Tamiti, Hone Harawira, Annette Sykes, yourself, Moana Jackson. These people have been dissecting and speaking truth to power and pulling apart the mechanisms of institutionalized racism. I mean, these are the grand conspiracies. The doctrine of discovery, institutionalized racism. These are the things that we've been battling for years.
I think I'm just going to be blunt and say that what we're dealing with are a couple of coneheads who are perpetuating conspiracy theories that play to our darkest feelings and thoughts. In other words, we've got an army of people out there in times of trouble. In their dark times, they turn to the sort of beacon of light on the top of a hill somewhere. What they don't realise is that that beacon of light is nothing more than a crock of hoha. And, you know, my brother there is completely right. There have been so many more people out there fighting for many decades for the rights of Māori, and then all of a sudden, Billy TK comes along and is perpetuating myths found on YouTube.
Do we engage? You know, some of us have been trying that. I know of lots of people doing one-on-one kind of trying to deprogram. Do we block? Do we ignore?
I don't think so that blocking people who have been misled, especially our own people, I don't think so that's a solution. One of the things that we can do is help them to fact check the information that they are putting out there. So, for example, Billy TK put out some disinformation that the Gates Foundation was putting out non-approved FDA vaccines into India and also Africa. Now, it only took me 10 minutes on my phone to find out that it was disinformation that was being spread by Candace Owens, who's someone who actually wants African-American people to go back into slavery. It's really important you find out the source of where that information came from, and then the people who are placing it on Facebook, just give them a bit of guidance and say, look, this is where your information came from. That's not a reputable source.
You know, I found in talking to people about it, it's like talking about faith. It becomes a religious conversation nearly. It becomes about belief. I've had people actually go, this is what I believe, and if you say any different, I will block you. So I think it comes down for me, instead of trying to necessarily argue the facts with them, because that just sends you down another rabbit hole. The more you argue your point of view, the stronger they entrench themselves in their position. I think it's about trust. I think people get scared. People get scared, and they haven't got anybody of authority to trust. Billy has stepped into that vacuum. Of course, they don't trust Jacinda and people that don't look like them, because ultimately this misinformation is detrimental to our people on a mental health level, because people are scared, and rightfully so.
Matthew, the implications at a political level, at a national level, we saw Jerry Brownlee send out a bit of a dog whistle, inferring that there was a conspiracy, that there was a lack of transparency. So what was your response to that?
But what he's doing is he is playing again to the emotions of a constituency that he possibly sees as a national vote as well. I mean, let's face it, they're doing it tough. But let's come back to the overall problem that we've got here. We are being recolonised again by a group of Pākehā white males from another country who are peddling a message through a channel called Billy TK and the New Zealand Public Party, and others out there as well that want us to scurry their message along. They want to get these brown boys involved in the debate, and in doing so, that is creating a huge amount of mamai and grief across our communities.
Any last words in terms of where we need to keep our focus?
I've just seen really good people who mean really well get led down a really dark path, because this is an unprecedented, justifiably scary time for everybody of Aotearoa in the midst of all of this COVID and what's going on globally. So just adding to that, that anxiety for our people, that is what I take issue with.
Now is not the time for conspiracies and hoha. Now is the time for solutions so we can finally get ahead of the curve. We need to put to rest the intergenerational colonisation of mamai that's been built up over many years and get down to work. And that would be my message. Contest of ideas to all the politicians, not conspiracy theories and hoha.
Welcome back. Now, journalists are required to ensure that any story is fair, balanced and accurate, or they can be challenged by the Broadcasting Standards Authority. Academic research is even more stringent. Jane Kelsey is a law professor as well as an internationally respected analyst, writer and commentator on globalisation. She knows a thing or two about research. Jane, as an academic, could you describe to me what research, robust research, looks like to you?
Well, there's a few prerequisites. One is that you don't claim to research on things that you don't know about. The second is that you work from evidence base, and that means that you need to have sources that you cite that people can check back up on, and you need to put out what you do to peer review so that other people can look over what you've done. In universities, where we have this grand notion of academic freedom and playing a critic and conscience role, it means exercising that with responsibility, making sure that what we're putting out there is sound, and if we're speculating, we're clear that we're speculating. And at the same time, being responsible about what information we are putting where and taking the consequences of doing that into account.
So, Tina, I know that you've done some writing and some studying on social media. Can you give us some understanding of what you're seeing?
The genesis of many, not all, but many of these conspiracy theories are the alt-right. And the alt-right have their own interests and reasons for wanting to destabilise society and destabilise centralist governments. But also they find very fertile soil in the minds of people who have been oppressed before or do feel that they have a right to challenge government. And particularly for Māori, we know that there are issues to do with complying with the treaty and recognising our rights. And so these groups who seek to destabilise centrist government can really capitalise on that and become like that little ngangara in your ear that goes, see that? You know that they're after you. And then they'll extend it just this little bit further to ask you to put your body on the line. But it's, in their interests, not necessarily in our interests.
There are conspiracies out there in the world. There are conspiracies, by the big tobacco industries, to get us to not believe that tobacco is harmful for you and to keep smoking. Or that climate change is all a big have and that we don't need to worry about anything. It's an illegitimate attempt to push propaganda down the throats of people to support various vested interest groups. And the really fascinating thing about what's happening at the moment is that the vested interest groups that are trying to draw in a lot of our people are actually completely contrary to the notions of rangatiratanga, Māori self-determination, the collective well-being of communities. And what they're fooling our people into doing is believing that they are actually the vanguard of truth, light and correctness, and there couldn't be anything further from the truth. So I'll just say to our people out there watching this show today is just Put your trust in people that have a track record of being right. And a lot of people that I see out there, like Billy TK and his group of followers, I've never seen them anywhere before in my life. And I've been around the activist traps just about all my adult life and know just about everybody who's ever participated in righteous actions.
One of the reasons I'm not on social media, apart from the fact that there is no rigorous scrutiny of what happens there, is that the data gets into the hands of the big tech companies. And if we're looking at conspiracies, it's actually the role that the big tech companies play in manipulating the information, whether it's for elections or fostering Nazi propaganda, or they need to be regulated, but we need to say what kind of regulation, not states who may be in cahoots with the big tech companies doing that. And that's much more significant question for us than whatever the United Nations is supposedly doing.
So what do we need to do to keep tino rangatiratanga activism in the front so we can hold our government to accountable, but also keep strong public health strategies in place to protect us all?
Our grassroots movement around checkpoints is something that I believe we should be setting up in an intellectual fashion as well, setting checkpoints up around our minds to critically interrogate the information that we are allowing into our minds and then out our mouths and then through our communities.
The governments have learnt some lessons, and they have understood that things like the roadblocks actually are an exercise of the treaty relationship that benefits everybody. I would like to see them out there articulating and defending that more, because we risk squandering a real opportunity to move the debate and the understandings forward in Aotearoa about how we can genuinely have a treaty-based response to crises. And then hopefully that might become integral to our everyday activities.
Well, I'm currently been working on the National Pandemic Response Group, which is iwi Māori around the country delivering food to people, making sure homeless people have got houses to live in. It's an expression of mana Māori motuhake, but more importantly, it's about our people doing something practical, I think, deep in the hearts of all of those involved in these aberrations. They feel like they're doing good and they're making a difference. But what I'd suggest is that doing good and making the difference is defending not some other body's kaupapa from overseas, but defending our homes, defending our regions, defending our kaumātuas, our wahine and children. And the best way to do that right now is to stay home.
Stay home, says Mike Smith. Tautoko. And let's do as Tina Ngata suggests, set up intellectual checkpoints around our minds to critically interrogate information.